Buckingham Palace has a problem. And for once, it isn't Harry and Meghan, it's each other. After 6 years, 3,000 miles, one tell-all book, one Oprah interview, and enough headlines to fill a library, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are coming home. Not for a visit, not for a jubilee, not for a funeral. Home, their kids are already enrolled in British schools. The move could happen within days. And you'd think, after everything, this would be the moment the royal family closes ranks and figures out what happens next together. It is not. Because right now, behind the gates of 2 different royal residences, there are 2 very different conversations happening. In one, a 77-year-old king is quietly telling aides he wants to hear his son out. In the other, the future King of England is telling people he is done. Completely, finally, permanently done. This is the story of how Harry and Meghan's return didn't heal the royal family's oldest wound. It just moved it to a new address. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why William isn't budging, why Charles might be making a move his own heir doesn't approve of, and why Kate Middleton, of all people, might be the one person standing quietly in the middle of it all. Let's get into it. Let's set the scene, because the timeline here actually matters. For 6 years, Montecito has been Harry and Meghan's world. The estate. The chickens. The Netflix deals. The podcast. The distance, both physical and emotional, from the family Harry once called the firm. Every time a reporter asked about a permanent return, the answer from insiders was some version of not happening. Security concerns. Business commitments. A life fully built on American soil. Then, seemingly overnight, everything changed. According to multiple outlets, King Charles was only informed of the couple's decision to relocate back to the UK on a Sunday, and notably, this wasn't something raised or discussed when the Sussexes visited Britain back in July. In other words, whatever conversations happened at that summer meeting, this wasn't one of them. The king found out later, and reportedly quite suddenly. Within days, British newspapers had the story splashed across their front pages. The children, Archie, who's 7 now, and Lilibet, 5, have reportedly already been enrolled in English schools for the new term, which starts in early September. That detail alone tells you how real this is. You don't enroll your kids in school on a maybe. Here's the part that matters for everything we're about to talk about. Reports are clear that Harry and Meghan are not returning to royal duties. They won't be working members of the family. They won't be moving into a royal residence. The plan, according to reporting, is a private home outside London, away from the walls of Kensington or Windsor. On paper, this is framed as a private family decision, not a political one. But you and I both know that in this family, there's no such thing as a purely private decision. Not when the person moving is 6th in line to the throne, and not when the last time he set foot in the UK for anything other than a funeral, it made global headlines. So the question isn't really, are they moving back? That part seems settled. The real question, the one every royal reporter in Britain is chasing right now, is what happens after the moving trucks arrive. And that's where the family starts to split. Let's start with Charles, because his position is, in some ways, the most surprising. This is a king who, by most accounts, has spent the last several years quietly trying to keep a door open to his younger son, even while publicly maintaining distance. Reports suggest that in the wake of learning about the move, Charles's instinct wasn't panic or anger. It was curiosity, openness, a willingness to sit down and actually hear out what Harry wants. And when you think about where Charles is in his own story right now, that instinct makes a certain kind of sense. He's 77 years old. He's a king who has been open about his own health battles over the past couple of years. He has spent his entire adult life waiting for a throne that, once he finally got it, came wrapped in illness, scrutiny, and a family that increasingly looks fractured to the outside world. If there's one thing a monarch in that position tends to want, it's legacy. Not headlines, legacy. And the king who quietly reunited his broken family is a very different legacy than the king who let the rift define his reign. There's also a more practical layer here. Charles is reportedly of the view that decisions about Harry's future role however limited that role might be, are his to make, not William's. Sources indicate the king doesn't see this as something that requires his heir's sign-off, and has apparently found William's rigid opposition to even exploring reconciliation more of an obstacle than a help. Think about what that actually means. The King of England is reportedly frustrated with his own heir for being too firm on this. That's not a small dynamic. That's a monarch pushing back against the very person he's grooming to take over, because on this one issue, they see the future of the family completely differently. Now, to be fair to Charles, open to a conversation is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Being willing to hear Harry out is not the same as rolling out a red carpet. Royal watchers have been very clear that nobody, not Charles, not anyone close to the palace, is talking about restoring official titles, military patronages, or a return to royal duties. That door, by all indications, stays shut. What's on the table is something much smaller and much more human, a father wanting a real relationship with his son and his grandchildren. Now that geography is no longer the excuse. But even that smaller ask runs straight into a wall. And that wall has a name. If Charles represents the heart wanting reconciliation, William, by every indication, represents the head saying absolutely not. Not like this, not yet, maybe not ever. And to understand why, you have to remember what actually happened between these two brothers. This isn't some vague falling out over scheduling conflicts. This is a rift built on a memoir that detailed private family moments in unflinching detail. It's built on a Netflix docuseries. It's built on an Oprah interview that raised allegations serious enough to shake the institution to its foundations. William, by multiple accounts over the years, felt that his brother didn't just step away from royal life, he took the family's private business and turned it into content. So when the news broke that Harry and Meghan were moving back, William's reported reaction wasn't relief. It was suspicion. Sources say he's been actively pressing for details. What exactly is Harry after here? Is this really about the kids and a fresh start, or is there an angle? Given the history, you can understand why that question is the first one out of his mouth. Here's the part that really tells you where things stand, though. William has reportedly been boxed out of the direct discussions happening between Charles and Harry's camp. Think about that for a second. The future king, the man who will one day decide exactly this kind of question for himself, is not in the room. His father is handling this his own way, and William is finding out details secondhand, the same way the rest of us do, through sources, insiders, and newspaper reports. That's not a small slight in a family obsessed with hierarchy and process. That's a signal. And by most accounts, William is fed up. Not annoyed, fed up. He reportedly views the idea of readmitting Harry into any kind of family or institutional role, even informally, as inviting a fresh round of controversy at exactly the moment the monarchy can least afford it. And then there's the part of this that isn't about optics or institutions at all. It's about his own kids. Prince George is starting senior school. If you're not familiar with the British system, that's a genuine milestone, the transition into the years that shape a teenager in a country where royal children already live under a level of scrutiny most of us can't imagine. William, by every account of him as a father, has become fiercely protective of keeping his own family unit insulated from the chaos that's defined so much of the last decade of royal news. The last thing he reportedly wants, right as George is stepping into this new chapter, is a fresh wave of tabloid frenzy about whether Uncle Harry is back in the fold. So when you put it together, the betrayal he still feels, the distrust of Harry's motives, the fear of renewed scandal, and the instinct to protect his own children's stability, William's position isn't really about anger for anger's sake. It's about risk management. He's not just a brother in this story, he's the future monarch, and he's making a calculation about what kind of institution he wants to inherit. The problem is, his father is making a very different calculation, and right now neither one is backing down. Now let's talk about Kate, because her position in all of this is maybe the most fascinating, precisely because she's saying almost nothing at all. By most accounts, Kate has always had a somewhat different relationship with Harry than William does. She's reportedly sympathetic to Harry's desire to reconnect with his roots, to give his kids a taste of the country and the family history he grew up with. That's a very human, very understandable instinct, and it apparently isn't lost on Kate, who has her own deep sense of what family and continuity mean, especially after her own very public health battle over the past couple of years put everything in sharper focus for her. But, and this is the key word here, Kate is reportedly being extremely careful not to get ahead of William, not to cross him, not to move faster than his own timeline allows. Think about the position she's actually in. As the future Queen Consort, Kate has spent years building a public identity around stability, family, and quiet competence. She doesn't do drama. She doesn't do leaks. If she were to publicly or even privately push William toward reconciliation before he's ready, she'd risk two things: undermining her husband at a moment when he clearly feels strongly about this, and inserting herself into a brother-to-brother, father-to-son dynamic that isn't really hers to referee. So what you get instead is quiet sympathy paired with total discipline. Kate, by every indication, is playing the long game, staying warm enough that if and when William does soften, she's not the one who has to walk anything back, but staying disciplined enough that she never looks like she's pulling him somewhere he doesn't want to go. It's actually a pretty savvy position if you think about it. Kate doesn't need to win this argument today. She just needs to still be trusted by both her husband and, eventually, whatever version of this family exists 5 or 10 years from now. And that means playing it exactly the way she's playing it, patient, private, and firmly on William's timeline, not Harry's. Let's zoom out for a second, because I think it's easy to hear Harry and Meghan are moving to the UK and assume that means something bigger than it does. It doesn't mean a return to royal life. Every credible report on this has been consistent: no working royal duties, no royal residence, no formal reinsertion into the firm. What's actually happening is that a family, a father, a mother, and 2 young children is relocating for reasons that appear to be genuinely personal. School terms, proximity to grandparents, maybe even just a desire, after 6 years, to see what it feels like to live somewhere that isn't defined entirely by the decision to leave. But here's the thing about royal family stories: the actual facts are almost never the whole story. The optics are the story. And the optics of Harry and Meghan living 20 minutes from Kensington Palace, potentially crossing paths with William and Kate at school events, at family gatherings, in the same social orbit for the first time in years. That's a completely different situation than a phone call from California. Proximity changes everything. You can avoid a conversation with someone who's 5,000 miles away. You cannot avoid running into your brother at your nephew's school sports day if you both live in the same county. And that's really what's driving the tension right now. It's not really about whether Harry moves back, that ship has sailed. It's about what proximity forces everyone to actually deal with, in real time, in a way that 6 years of distance let them avoid. Royal insiders have been fairly blunt about where the institutional line sits, even as this personal drama plays out. Harry may live in the UK. He will not easily be welcomed back into what's being called the family business, meaning the working, public-facing side of the monarchy, without something significant happening first. And by most accounts, that something is a public apology, not a quiet, behind-closed-doors acknowledgement. A real, public reckoning with the things that were said and written over the past several years. Whether that's fair is a whole separate conversation. Plenty of people will tell you Harry has his own grievances that deserve acknowledgement too, and that reconciliation is rarely a one-way street. But if the reporting is accurate, that's the price being quietly set by the institution itself, regardless of what Charles wants personally as a father. Which puts Charles in an interesting spot too, doesn't it? He may be the king. But even kings, in a constitutional monarchy built on centuries of precedent and image management, don't always get to just decide things emotionally and have the institution fall in line. There's a machine around him, advisors, communications teams, the long shadow of the firm. And that machine has its own instincts about risk, separate from what a father might privately want for his son. Here's the thing I think gets missed in a lot of coverage of this story. At this point, this isn't really a Harry story. Harry's position has been pretty consistent for years now. He said publicly, more than once, that he wants reconciliation. That distance from the family has cost him, that he'd welcome a path back to some kind of relationship, even if not to official duties. The real story here is what's happening between Charles and William. Because what we're actually watching is a preview of something much bigger than one wayward prince. We're watching how the two most powerful men in the monarchy handle a genuine disagreement about the institution's future. Charles, nearing the end of his reign by any realistic actuarial measure, is thinking about legacy, family, and what kind of king he wants to have been. William, positioning himself for a reign that could last decades, is thinking about risk, stability, and protecting an institution he'll one day be entirely responsible for, plus protecting 3 children who are watching how their parents handle exactly this kind of pressure. Those aren't irreconcilable goals necessarily, but they are, right now, pointed in different directions on this specific issue. And the fact that William has reportedly been shut out of the direct conversations Charles is having, that's not just about Harry. That's a data point about how Charles is choosing to exercise his authority as king, even with his own heir standing right there with strong objections. If you're William, watching your father make a unilateral call on something this sensitive, something that could shape how the public sees the monarchy right as you're preparing to inherit it, that has to sting a little. It's not just my brother might be coming back. It's my father didn't feel like he needed my input on a decision that will absolutely become my problem eventually. That's the real tension simmering under this whole story. Forget Harry and Meghan for a second. This is a father and son negotiating who actually holds the power in this family, using Harry's return as the test case. So where does this actually go from here? If you're looking for a clean resolution, I have to be honest with you, there isn't one on the horizon. What's far more likely is a slow, messy, very public unwinding that plays out over months, maybe years, with leaks from sources close to every single person involved, each one shaping the narrative in their own favour. Here's roughly how I'd expect this to play out, based on everything we've covered. Charles will likely continue pursuing some kind of private relationship with Harry, visits, calls, maybe eventually a more public reconciliation moment if the political and institutional risk feels manageable to him. He's not going to force William to participate, but he's also not going to let his son's objections stop him from having the relationship with his own grandchildren that he clearly wants. William, for his part, is unlikely to budge quickly. Rebuilding trust after everything that's been said and written takes far more than a change of address. If anything happens on his end, it'll be gradual, small gestures, maybe eventually a shared family event, but nothing that looks like forgiveness has been declared. And that apology the institution reportedly wants? Until something like that happens, don't expect William's position to move much at all. Kate will keep doing exactly what she's doing, staying warm, staying quiet, staying loyal to William's pace, ready to be a bridge the moment he's ready to build one, but never the one forcing the issue. And Harry and Meghan? They get what they arguably wanted out of this in the first place, their kids growing up with some connection to Britain, a shorter flight to see their grandfather, and a chance, however slim, that time and proximity do what 6 years and an ocean couldn't. Whether William ever comes around is genuinely an open question, and depending who you ask. It might be the one variable in this entire situation that nobody, not Charles, not the palace communications team, not even Harry himself, can actually control. What we do know is this. The return to the UK didn't end the royal rift. It just changed its shape. For 6 years, the story was about distance, about a prince who left and a family that let him go. Now the story is about proximity, and what happens when the people who've spent years avoiding each other suddenly can't anymore. So that's where things stand right now. A king who wants his family whole again, an heir who isn't ready to forgive, and a duchess quietly holding the line in between them. If you've been following this saga for years like I have, you know one thing for certain, this story is nowhere near over. The second Harry and Meghan actually land in the UK, expect a fresh wave of headlines, sightings, and inevitably, more sources say reports about who saw who at what school gate. I'll be covering every development as it happens, so if you want to stay ahead of this story, make sure you're subscribed and you've got notifications turned on, because I promise you, the next chapter of this is coming fast. Let me know down in the comments, do you think William ever comes around? Or is this rift permanent? I read every single comment and I genuinely want to know where you land on this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.